We get major reports that there's an NHL team showing heavy interest in Jets forward Nikolaj Ehlers. We're going to break down this and that the Toronto Maple Leafs have a huge decision to make with multiple RFAs still not signed and one's going to arbitration and the other demanded a trade. We'll get into all this later on this episode. Before I start, I just want to give a shout out to the almost 4,000 of you guys. 3,977. We're so close. We're 23 away from our goal of 4,000 by Sunday. So if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure to go down and hit the subscribe button. We'll be all off season into next season, giving you updates from around the NHL. But with that, let's hop straight into the first topic today, which is Nikolaj Ehlers trade imminent. So we do get reports from an insider for the New York Islanders, and he is a writer with NHL.com. He says there are reports that Carolina is pushing heavily for Ehlers. Can confirm those reports. Obviously, this does make sense because Jake Guentzel just went to the Tampa Bay Lightning and Carolina is looking to fill out their wingers. Now, he does continue on to say that the Islanders had interest going into the NHL draft. There could still be interest, but he isn't sure. So when you do look at this trade, from a Carolina Hurricanes just kind of point of view, this would be quite big for both teams. Obviously, Carolina acquiring a guy like Nikolaj Ehlers would be massive. 82 games, 25 goals, 36 assists for 61 points. He had 233 shots. He had a decent few giveaways and a decent few takeaways. He was a plus 27 and he played just under 16 minutes time on ice. Now, going out and acquiring a guy like Nikolaj Ehlers will not be cheap for a team like Carolina. Obviously, this is a team that needs to take in $6 million on the cap as well. He hasn't modified no trade clause as well, so he would have to say he wanted to go here if they were a part of the 10-team no trade list. So the first thing looking at this with the Jets' perspective, they look like they want to move on from a guy like Ehlers. We've seen reports that Ehlers wants a fresh start, that the Jets are looking to move on from him. There's a few other players, but just looking at a guy like Ehlers and the fact that Carolina is heavily pursuing him, maybe we see a trade in the very close horizon. We know that Winnipeg is looking for a top four defenseman. They're looking for a young NHL ready player, or they're looking for a first. I believe there's multiple pieces would be going back for Ehlers. But with Carolina having guys like Martin Necas not signed, they have a few RFAs, they have UFAs, they want to fill this roster out. Maybe we see the Jets and a team like Carolina do a swap of a guy like Nikolaj Ehlers straight for a guy like Martin Necas. Obviously, there is no signing on Necas yet, so would be trading for his rights. Maybe we see Carolina go out and add to this. Maybe they add a pick. Maybe they add a prospect. Maybe they add a young defenseman. But I think with the serious traction going around these two teams, the season coming up in just 80 days, I could definitely see this trade happening sooner rather than later, especially with the heavy interest. Now, from the Islanders' perspective, I don't think they can outbid a team like the Carolina Hurricanes. Hurricanes have a guy like Martin Necas. Kotkaniemi is another name that could be going. Who really knows what they will end up giving up? But I don't think the Islanders can outbid them, especially with the fact of how many picks, prospects, and young players Carolina has. But what's your guys' thoughts on this entire situation? Jets fans, what would you want in return from Carolina? Carolina fans, what would you want to give up for a guy like Nikolaj Ehlers? I know it would be quite a big trade and it would shake the NHL, so let me know down in the comments. But with that, let's hop straight into the second topic today, which is the Leafs have a huge decision to make. Now, we were briefly talking about arbitration and how Martin Necas did go there, but if you look at the second name down on this list, you can see Toronto Maple Leafs forward Connor Dewar. So Connor Dewar did fill for his arbitration yesterday. The last day for arbitration would be filed today, July 6th at 5 p.m. Eastern, but the hearings will not be held till July 20th to August 4th. So with the Toronto Maple Leafs having a guy like Connor Dewar go into arbitration, it does make things tricky. Obviously, if you don't know what a thing like arbitration is, it would mean the general manager, the player and his agent, and a third party would sit down, discuss the contracts. We've seen it happen with Ilya Samsonov just last season, and this could either build or ruin relationships between the general manager and the player. But looking at a guy like Connor Dewar, split between games between the Minnesota Wild and the Toronto Maple Leafs after they acquired him at the trade deadline last year. He had 11 goals, 8 assists for 19 points in 74 games. He had 77 shots, 6 giveaways with 21 takeaways. playing 11 minutes and 39 seconds time on ice. Connor Duar's 5'10 at the age of 25, so he does still have a lot of room to grow in the NHL. Now, Connor Duar is not going to be the guy that's going to come in and score 20 goals, 30 goals. He could, but I don't think he's going to be that type of player. But Connor Duar is a piece that's relentless on the forecheck. He can play in your bottom six. He's a guy that's going to star on the penalty kill. He's a piece that, in my opinion, Brad Treliving must bring back. Now, when you are looking at Duar's last contract, he did sign a two-year contract with the Minnesota Wild, with making $800,000 per year. This contract's up. He was an RFA and went straight to arbitration. Now, things do get complicated for the Toronto Maple Leafs with bringing back a guy like Connor Duar, and that being they don't have cap space. So the projected cap space for the Toronto Maple Leafs this season is minus almost $700,000. Obviously, they can clear room, they can send guys down to make this work out. But the big problem with this Toronto team, yes, you still have a guy like Connor Duar not signed. Yes, you have a guy like Nick Robertson that said he doesn't want to sign and wants to be traded. But you also don't have a third-line left wing. Now, obviously, there are rumors going around that a guy like Easton Cowan could crack this lineup as early as this season. Training camp's going to be a major piece for that. But looking at this Toronto team, there is a gaping hole on the left wing third-line winger. When you're looking through the team, obviously you have Matthew Knives, Austin Matthews, and William Nylander on the top line. Bob McMahon, John Tavares, and Mitch Marner. No left wing on the third line. Max Domi, Calle Jarnkrok. This, as a whole, I really like this top nine. I think this top nine can compete if you add that third line left wing. Now, when you do look at the fourth line, Pontus Holmberg, David Kampf, and Ryan Reeves. This team right here with these defensemen, with the two extras being Connor Timmins and Yanni Hakanpää, has $80,000 in salary cap. They need to make room. The first one I wanted to point out, and the first player that I think may be traded if it comes down to it, is David Kampf. Obviously, we see David Kampf in this bottom six. He's been a phenomenal penalty killer for this team. Offensively, he does struggle, but he's one of the league's best PKers. Bringing in a guy like David Kampf was obviously the perfect piece for this Toronto team, but at $2.4 million, I think this is where we see his contract moved out. The second player I wanted to point out, if you look down on the fourth pairing, Connor Timmins. Connor Timmins is a guy that looked phenomenal last preseason, going into it, scoring goals, being a quarterback on the power play before going down with an injury and never really getting back into this Leafs team. If you move out a guy like David Kampf, if you move out Connor Timmins with him, you're clearing up $3.5 million in cap. This is perfect, as you could bring back a guy like Connor Duar and whatever it's going to cost in arbitrations. You can bring back a guy like Nick Robertson to fill in on this third line. You could run the lineup of Nick Robertson, Max Domi, Calle Jarnkrok. Then you move down, you can bring up a winger, you can slide Pontus Holmberg to center and still have Ryan Reeves there. Maybe a guy like Alex Steeves would fit perfectly on this fourth line as well. What were your guys' thoughts on this? What's your thoughts on Connor Duar going into arbitration? What's your thoughts on Nick Robertson not wanting to sign with the Leafs? I know that third line is getting a little scary, but Brad Treliving needs to figure out something soon. But with that, let's get into the third topic today, which is everyone's favorite, comment of the day. The comment today comes from Andrea, and they say, there is no alternate universe where McDavid and Draisaitl aren't career Oilers. They live and breathe Oilers. I think there is a world where we see it. I mean, we've seen Draisaitl's agent come out and say if they're not signed soon, he doesn't know if a contract's going to work. So if you haven't watched that episode, you can go watch that. It should be popping up somewhere on your screen right now. But you can also leave a comment on everything I talked about today. If you do, you could be featured on the next episode as comment of the day as well. While you're down there, leave a like, subscribe, share this with your friends. We'll be back maybe tonight or tomorrow with another episode, so keep an eye out for that. But I've been your host, Mark Pine. Take care.